Hey y'all, and welcome to Real Talk with Dr. LaWanda Hill. I have been eagerly awaiting part 2 of this series as we're talking about Black women and our relationship with our bodies to begin to broach this topic of intimacy with our bodies, which my definition of intimacy is to know and be known. And so to have intimacy with your body is to know it, to be connected with it, to feel empowered in it. And it's been my experience personally and as a clinician as I sit in the room with other women and we explore intimacy with the body, whether it be body image, whether it be body positivity, whether it be sexuality. I often go back to the initial messages that we've received about knowing our bodies. What are they? If you took a moment to pause right now and you thought about what are some of the first messages you received about knowing your body, they aren't really positive. They're not really empowering. They're not really encouraging self-exploration. They're for sure not encouraging self-pleasure, and they're not encouraging agency, right? The messages that we have received have really disconnected us from a very sacred, I feel, practice of cultivating intimacy with ourselves. And so I am excited, y'all, to be joined with a very good friend and colleague, Eliza Bouqin, who is the expert on all things, in my opinion, the body and intimacy, whether it be understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves for the sake of feeling empowered and, pursuing well-being, or whether it be exploring ourselves sexually and engaging our senses so as to bring pleasure to ourselves. Eliza has the full gamut of knowledge.
Whenever I hear the word intimacy, automatically I just go to into me, you see, right? So into me, you see. And as it relates to our bodies, I think there is a certain level of vulnerability that it really requires us to be able to be intimate, even ourselves with our bodies, that requires us to be rooted in fully accepting ourselves. And not just fully accepting ourselves, but fully appreciating and loving ourselves. So I think in order for there to be that physical body intimacy, even with ourselves, there has to be a level of trust. And our body needs to be able to trust that how we view it, how we treat it, how we care for it is with the highest of intentions.
I want to tell y'all a little bit about Eliza. She is out of Houston, Texas. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a sex therapist, and an energy healer. And she is the co-founder of Melanin Mental Health, which has really just changed the game for Black and brown folks as it relates to mental health resources and destigmatizing mental health. In fact, one of my favorite shirts that they have that on that apparel line is "Therapy is dope. My therapist is dope."
It is at the core in our lineage of what was there before it was taken from us.
Oh, please say that again. That is good.
Before colonization, before the oppression, like that was very much a part of us. Our cultures and our people very much saw the sacredness within our bodies and that connection with our bodies. And we're very aware and even how to have that connection with the body and also with Mother Nature. Right. And so they understood the flow and the connection between all of this and honored it. And it was sacred. I don't think that it wasn't there. I think it's been robbed of us. And we are trying to unlearn that and reconnect with what is essentially at the core of who we are.
That's so good. That's so good. Like, I do believe I was talking to one of my friends a couple years ago. So I did some work and I'm still doing some work with Audubon. And, Audubon does all this birding. And I was like, all these Black and brown folks are really out here connected to the birds and the world and the woods and such. And it was so mind blowing to me. And she was like, LaWanda, before colonization, before we were ripped, before oppressive structures began to be in exist, we had a very strong connection to nature and to the world. And not to say that we still don't, but it just reminded me, of Sankofa, which I talk about all the time. You have to kind of go back to figure out where we are. And so that I like that reframe or that challenge because it's always been there. But you had these different forces that have come along and kind of I don't know, ripped us of it in some ways, or tried to sever, maybe sever that connection.
Tried to get like, so it was there, we couldn't be connected in the same way. So I can't be connected to myself. I can't be connected to source, because what the messaging that our ancestors got and that we continue to get is that you need a middleman, right? You need somebody else to help connect you to. What we already knew, we were already connected to Mother Earth. We were already connected to one another, because that's the other thing. Our cultures are collective cultures.
Yeah.
We understand the importance of the collective. So all of this different messaging, that disconnect, there was somebody else, something else, some other rules that were put into play, like, this is what you need. We were convinced that we needed something outside of ourselves to be okay.
And you've said this in previous talks. What was the function of that? Control, right?
Absolutely.
The function was purely control, because if I can like disconnect that natural connection that you have with your body, and that you and share with you that you need somebody else to intervene or to be that middle person, then I now can have control of you. I now can have control of your body. It robs you of your agency. It robs you of an active role in that relationship. And I feel like as we go back, like that's what we have to go back to, right? Of what those forces were.
And you think about, okay, when you think about the enslavement of Black bodies, right? So right there, there's a disconnect. I don't even belong to myself anymore, is what I'm being told. And what my body is being used for has nothing to do with my well-being. It has everything to do with somebody else and what their agenda is, and what they are trying to get rich off of. So like the messaging that our bodies don't belong to ourselves, well, we got that messaging a long time ago.
You just dropped a lot. Like, it, to me, it's so deep. And that's what we said when we started this episode or this series, is that our relationships with our body is covered by so many different things. And when we really go back and you use this example, you use this reality, this truth of the enslavement of Black bodies, like really then you begin to sever that relationship, which is natural. My body is for my well-being, right? It is connected to nature. It is mine to own. It is something that will be in community with other people, because that's where my well-being will come. But now I'm going to come and I'm going to intervene on a natural order. And now your body is no longer connected to your well-being. And that's the piece we have to unpack.
So Black and brown bodies, historically and even today, are used for production. They are seen as a source of production. And their well-being is not necessarily the priority. So if you think about when you are in those conditions, what it requires of us to do is to disconnect from our bodies in order to survive those conditions. My grandmother and even my father were migrant workers, right? So traveling, working in the fields. My father, he just recently passed. He passed from Parkinson's. Well, one thing that has been linked to Parkinson's has been when migrant workers were working out in the fields, the pesticides that would be sprayed above them, right? And so you think about that. There was a disregard. They weren't seen as what might this impact? How might this impact the people that are working?
Wow.
The end goal was production. If you're Black, if you're brown, you don't have to go that far back to be able to trace this.
Right.
So what does it take in order for me to work in these conditions or to survive these conditions? And so you're thinking about people that were enslaved. What did it require of them? Could they be fully present in their bodies to get through that? No. You learn to disassociate, disconnect from your body. Your body adapts, right? It adapts to the conditions so that you can survive the situation. Nowhere in that does that allow for me to feel vulnerable and be
right. That's good. Wow, that's rich. And so when you think about that, and you think about where they were, our ancestors, what did they pass on to us? What did they teach us? How then can they teach your generation, my generation, my nieces and nephews' generation, and so forth, how to be intimate and connected in our bodies. Hence why we're doing this whole series of how to have that intimacy with our body. So you said something that really stood out to me, and it makes me wonder, how do you even know when you are being present in your body, when you have been so socialized and conditioned to disassociate from it, or be disconnected from it, or have a very passive relationship with it?
Yeah. Well, and I think also when you are not, anything that you're not used to, anything that is outside of your comfort zone, it feels it feels unsettling, right?
Yeah,
So we
I
do
agree.
talk about like being present in my body. Sometimes being present in my body is really, really scary.
Ooh.
Sometimes being present in my body is very, very uncomfortable.
Mm.
And so I don't want to feel present in my body, because maybe my body also, if I have a history of trauma, not just in my lineage, but maybe in my life, in this lifetime, being in my body is a dangerous thing.
Right. Mm.
So I think that is the other piece, is as we are learning how to be more in our bodies, is that we have to know that being in my body is a safe thing.
Mm. Even if we have to reclaim that safety.
Absolutely. Even if it's like the first time it feels safe.
Wow. Because I mean, historically and intergenerationally, we have a lot of trauma, and the body keeps the score. So I am not, I mean, I guess it's suffice it to say, safe enough to say that all of us, to some degree, feel a level of fear and unsettlement when we are present in our bodies, just because of the intergenerational trauma that we hold.
Absolutely. At a cellular level, this gets passed down. And so what my great great grandmother, great great grandfather feared, I carry that on some level, on my cellular level, and also understanding that it's not safe to be in a black or brown body in this world,
Right.
right? Like just
Right.
walking out your front door, it's not safe. So
Mhm.
again, there are so many factors that are at play that give us the message that it's not safe, right? So there's one thing that we may come from a lineage where people couldn't be in their bodies. One, it was not allowed.
Yeah.
You can't pause for self-care when you're doing
Oh,
what you're doing.
you need to get out here and pick this cotton and have this certain amount of pounds done. And if you don't, you're going to get 30 lashes. So you need to
Absolutely.
do what you need to do.
Absolutely. So they can't teach us something that was actually also dangerous, to pause and reflect. And how are you feeling? So there's a certain level of privilege that comes with healing.
I agree.
So like to be able to even say, this is a problem and I want to work on it, right? Like to even have the space to do
Yeah.
that is the privilege that our ancestors didn't have.
And really, some of our own current, brothers and sisters and people don't have. I think that
Absolutely.
that's important, a good reminder to be able to reflect, to not have to be in survivor mode and actually pursue healing is a privilege that, we don't take lightly, that I definitely want to be able to bridge the gap for people, right? To name that may feel so scary or foreign, or like, who has time for that, when I'm trying to do all these different things. But hopefully one of the things that this series can help do is be a bridge for that, to be able to actively take that time and energy, because I think it's important to reclaim that agency, right? To reclaim that divine connection that is ours, because to me, that's the greatest revenge and bounce back from oppression and things that have tried to rob you of what is your birthright, is to reclaim it. And I
Absolutely.
do believe reclaiming our relationships with our bodies and all that, because it's a beautiful relationship if we can reclaim it and do the healing work.
Yeah. Pleasure is resistance. Joy is resistance, especially in a world that is structured that you don't experience those things.
Mhm.
Right? So to be able to claim it and experience it really can become part of your resistance. So as you are learning to be more in your body and claim it and own it and experience the fullness of it, that really is an act of resistance.
And an act of liberation, which is what we were talking about earlier, right? To be able to be in your body reclaim it. No, be in your body, feel it, and reclaim it as an act of resistance and an act of like reclaiming your own sense of agency. And so you do like, is it chakras work, healing work, energy work?
Yeah, energy healing work. Yes.
Energy healing work.
Mm-hmm.
Give us an overview, because I feel like that's a perfect pivot into that healing, natural, ancestral heritage work that people don't always have insight about, or maybe have some misconceptions about. So if you can give us an overview of that energy healing work and what that looks like.
Yeah. So really, I think we hear a lot about that today. Like some people practice Reiki and the chakras and energy healing. And, ooh, what is this? And, is this witchcraft or whatever it is? But if we look at our lineages, this is old, ancient ways of healing, things that our ancestors knew and understood. And so really the energy healing is kind of built off of what you were talking about earlier, that the body keeps the score. Mm-hmm. So we are more than just our body, and we are more than just our thoughts, right? We are also these spiritual beings, these energetic beings. Whether you call it spirit, whether you call it energy, it's still the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is an integral part of us as well. So energy healing really is being able to identify if there is something energetically that is off for me. So the sort of the core of where I work from is from the chakra system. Okay. So there's 7 major chakras, and they are located at different points in our body. And so if you can think of it as almost this little energy source that produces different types of energy. Mm-hmm. So for example, the first chakra is the root chakra, which is grounding, safety, feeling like I belong. Second one is your sacral. This is the sensual. This is the go with the flow. This is our sexual energy. Mm. The third one is the solar, and that is knowing who I am, getting things done. It's my mental thinking. Then we have the heart, right? So your heart chakra located right here at the center of your chest. And this is love, connection, empathy, compassion. We move on to our throat, our communication. So we are using our throat chakra energy here today, right? To communicate clearly. And then we move up to our brow, which is our intuition. So we all have it. We do. A lot of us ignore it.
Yeah, we do.
I know that I know. I don't know how I know, but I just know, right? That's that energy. And then our crown is our connection to a power greater than ourselves. Whatever you believe in, whether that's nature, whether you call it Bob, whether you call it God, it doesn't care. It just is, right? So by understanding when I'm off energetically, so I'll give you an example. Again, I'll go back to, I shared with you, my father passed away recently. And so I knew that my root chakra energy was off. I'm ungrounded.
Right, because that's what grounds me. That was your part of your center. Okay.
Yes, and the life as I knew it is off. So how does that help me? Well, think of this even in physical terms. So think about you.
That's what I'm thinking as you're talking. I'm like, this is so all connected. It's so all connected.
All connected. So if you think about we've all heard the stories of couples that have been together for years, and one partner passes away, and then shortly thereafter, the other one passes away. What was the reason? There is no reason. It's a broken heart, what have you, right? So how that impacts me is I have another level of awareness of what might be off for me. Well, how does that help me? I know how to tend to myself.
There you go.
I know what I need to do. So do I need to do some heart meditations, doing some activities to help my heart chakra? So an activity for your heart would be connecting with others, expressing love, watching a movie that helps to open up your heart chakra energy, get that energy flowing, because it's so easy for us to close it down. Now, when you go to someone who works with the energy, who can help shift that energy, I'm trained to be able to kind of get in there and feel if I feel like something's off. Right? And then help restore that balance. And then, I'll give you some exercises to do afterwards. So again, it's just taking a holistic approach to healing. So I'm not just thinking therapist wise, we are very much trained with the mental, right? Like thoughts and emotions.
Right.
And then another aspect of training that I have is the somatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens to us physically when I'm triggered?
Yeah.
So when I'm triggered at the thought of being naked in front of my partner, what happens to me physically? What happens in my body? What happens to me mentally? And then what happens to me energetically? Ooh, I start to feel a certain way. So having all of this knowledge helps me to be able to tend to myself, body, mind, spirit.
And that is so, thank you first of all for that summary, because that was so amazing. I didn't know that, but I see all the different connections that I want to unpack a little bit more. And what you brought us to is like a natural space of, there is so many different connections. Like there is so much different natural things that we can do that we may call this different things. But the reality is that it's all the intimacy with the body giving us insight. And the more, as you were talking and thinking about, okay, well, my grounded, I'm probably messing it up, butchering it. My grounded chakra is off.
Your root, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. It's off. And so that's going to impact my heart, right? And so when we know that, it moves us from this, well, I just have to passively suffer, right? There's nothing that I can do about it. It just is what it is. That active knowing that, no, I can be aware of what's happening to me, and then I can attend to it, and I can do something to get myself to a different place. Of course, nothing can bring your father back, right? But there's different energy that can get your heart flowing, that can make you feel grounded, maybe even gather with other elders, right? To kind of help center you. So it just reminds me of how the more intimate we are with our bodies and we understand it, the more active agency that we can have, and the more we can take part in our own healing. Not to say that all our healing comes from us, because we're not an individualistic culture. Our healing does come from the collective, but knowing what you need from the collective, I believe, starts with intimacy. And so as you're talking, I was thinking, I experience this when I'm going to the physical therapist sometimes, or the massage therapist, right? I may not know which of my chakras may be off, but I can feel in my body, because I believe the body keeps the score, like, I feel so tense, like I'm holding some tension here. Something is off. I need them to go in. And I don't know if this is connected or not, but as they're going in and they're massaging out these kinks and these knots, and they're like, ooh, you're very tense here. That exchange of energy, really, if you will, and that really getting in there really helps me feel more centered and coming out. But it's the wherewithal to be like, first of all, it's the privilege, right? To say, I need a massage and I'm going to go be able to pay for it. So I understand those levels. But being able to say, my body is off, my body is tense, I'm getting enough water, I'm getting enough sleep, and it still feels off. What do I need to do to attend to it? I think it's so important. And so do you see there being a connection between what you're describing and massage?
Yeah, absolutely. So so let's take it a step back. What we know, yes, we are in these physical bodies, and what we know and what science tells us is we are energy. Right? Like we are a collective of lots of different energy, right? And so what we know is energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? So we are energetic beings, in addition to being physical beings. And again, whether you call it energetic beings or spiritual beings, it is what it is. But we are more than just
physical
skin and bones, right?
Right.
And so when you start to understand that, also, you will understand, and this is so important also for having a really rich sex life, or having like really rich relationships, even, is that there is an energetic exchange that happens with people, right? So we've all experienced this when you are around someone and you're just like, ooh,
yes,
they didn't touch me. They didn't maybe even speak to me, but I felt something around them, right? So that is because we can also be impacted by other people's energy. And sometimes our whole mood, right? Which you can think of that. So emotions, what are emotions? Energy in motion, right? So our whole mood can be impacted by somebody else's energy.
I say it all the time. I do not self-select into all white spaces, because in that space it's overwhelming under awareness. Sometimes
Mm.
lack of concern of human issues and social issues, and I can
Yes.
feel it, right? And so I will not self-select into those spaces unless it's work related and it's going to be a short amount of time, because I
Yeah.
can just feel that energy is just like, I don't want it, because it's not caring and communal and collectivist and kind of
You
conscious.
can't, when you can't fully be seen in spaces like that.
Oh,
If
that's
you
good.
are unaware, right? If
Yes.
you're unaware and you don't want to be aware, then you can't fully see all of me. And that is the thing about intimacy.
Mm,
To me, you see, I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard, right? And when I can be that, when I can see that, when you can see me, when you can hear me, when I can trust,
yeah.
right? When I can trust that you are going to see into me and I'm going to let all of my guard down, and that you are going to honor that, and that I'm going to be safe in my vulnerability. That's how we have intimacy. But
Oh,
I can't have intimacy if there's not trust, right? If it's not safe on some level.
mm-hmm.
So again, if we go back to how can we be just even intimate with our own bodies, I have to be able to trust even myself.
Right.
And I have to be able to see myself and be
Mm,
able to fully um, embrace that. My
mm,
body's listening to me.
right. Right. That, listen, Elisa, I knew it was gonna be hard to do this interview because we was gonna be talking all the time. I have, my brain is just, anytime our energies come together,
Yes.
I feel electrified, I feel
Yes.
seen, I feel like, man, there's so much that I learn and want to unpack. And I think that piece about really knowing yourself and knowing into you, being able to see into you to then outsource that,
Mhm.
right, is so critical. But that's a big piece that I want to tackle and I want to kind of like dispel. Like, we don't have to outsource this intimacy, vulnerability, connection, pleasure. It's something we can outsource. And by outsource, I mean rely on other people to be able to fulfill, but it starts with us, right? It
Absolutely.
starts with us. It starts with us being able to feel present in our bodies, love our bodies, relate to that, or tap into that divine connection that we have with it, feel vulnerable in it. And then as we're able to assess from other people's energy, and if they can appreciate it, then we can outsource that level of intimacy and pleasure. But I think it's kind of like you said, we've been taught to put that middle person in first and
Mhm.
not have the no middle person, that we be that initial person of connected with us.
Yeah. We don't trust ourselves, right? And that is because we were also taught not to trust ourselves. So many of the practices and the rituals and the beliefs of what made our experiences so sacred were robbed of us, and
Mm,
we're labeled as evil, we're labeled as savage, we're
mm,
labeled as just
mm,
anything negative. When you think about even um, when we were colonized, right?
mm.
So much of the teachings and the passing on of the information was destroyed so
Wiped
that
out.
only the people that were left could kind of relay this information. But then again, you're getting labeled as witchcraft, or it's getting labeled as whatever negative things it could be labeled as.
That
So
was so divine and so
so
powerful,
yes,
right? Demonic,
powerful is what you
so
just
powerful. But to cut off that power, I have to demonize it. I have to make it terrible. I have to make it something negative, and then insert myself. Wow, that really pisses me off. Insert myself in my non-sacred practices
said. Yes.
so that you can have a disconnect from what is truly powerful in yours. Wow.
You're going to be looking to somebody else for approval. You're going to be looking to somebody else to give you the okay. Someone, a system outside of you is what you are now looking for
Mm,
in order to give you direction. And so what we began to lose is that own internal compass that was really rooted in balance. So if you think back to our cultures, and I identify as a woman who is primarily indigenous, the indigenous way of healing and of health, it was balance. It was that
Yeah.
anything can
Yeah.
be medicine, anything can be poison.
Mm,
Nothing is neither good nor bad. It
mm.
is when it is out of balance.
Balance. Anything could be good. Anything could be poison. I mean,
Anything
but
can
it
be
has
medicine,
medicine,
anything can be poison,
but it has to
right?
be balanced.
Balance is,
Mm,
is what is necessary in
that's
order for
good.
there to be wellness. Okay,
Mm,
that was something that we learned how to be able to go within, and then when we needed counsel or we needed direction, we would seek out the elders, right, who
ah,
were also rooted in the same type of beliefs, right? Again, the collective and our connection to Mother Nature, and also our connection to ourselves in order to be connected more to our sources. We
mm,
didn't really have to go outside of that
mm,
to have wellness. So
mm.
again, we were disconnected, we were robbed, we were stripped, and then we were shamed, and it was dangerous for us to have agency over our bodies.
Ooh, ooh.
It was dangerous. You're going to be punished for that,
Right, right.
right?
And that agency and that disconnect still lives today. And that's why we're
Absolutely.
here. We are here to restore
Absolutely.
that agency and that connection. And so as you're talking, before we pivot to the second segment where we talk about like sexual intimacy, I'm curious, right? Like we have people who are across the socioeconomic bracket, right? Who are in different phases of life. It's a privilege to be able to pause and reflect on this. So I am curious to hear, and it may take you some time to think about this, three sacred practices to restore intimacy, right? That doesn't have to be commercialized or even cost money, right? But just three sacred practices to restore intimacy with ourselves and our body. And I'll share one that I feel is really sacred for me. If I am really trying to restore intimacy with my body, I like to have like just the lights out. I like to have minimal clothes on. I don't want too much things touching me. And I like to bring in music that I feel inspires me and centers me so that I can get back in my body. Perhaps I've been in my head too much thinking, or I've been distracted too much not thinking, or I've been so emotional and so disoriented or decentered by people's energy, people's words, people's actions, that I need to get back in my body, because I know that that is a safe place. And I know if I'm there and if I can connect to it, then I'm going to get some insight on how to move forward. So that's a sacred practice for me. But I am not the expert. I want to hear from Elisa. What are our three sacred
So what are you
practices
talking about?
to restore intimacy with your body? Because that is a powerful place to be if you have intimacy with your bodies.
So I think like for me, when I think about it in chakra terms, when I think about it in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I
Mm,
always think of the foundation,
okay.
right? So when I think about the foundation, I think about being grounded. So one thing that for me, when I know I really need to be present in my body, or maybe I'm feeling super anxious, right? So if I'm feeling super anxious, I'm outside of my body, I'm somewhere else, is to
Ah,
get outside and sit in the grass, right? Sit in nature, be connected to nature. So there's something very powerful about having your feet on the ground, having your feet or sitting on the ground, because what, again, if we go back to energy, the earth, it's giving off a certain vibration,
ah,
right? There's a certain vibration that the earth, Mother Earth gives off, that is slow and
mm,
grounding, right?
pace, balanced.
Yes.
Mm,
So when I need to feel grounded and in my body, so I'm going to go back to source, Mother Earth, and I'm going to feel her grounding me. I'm going to feel that vibration of the earth. So it is something like, especially if you suffer from anxiety, get outside, be in nature, connect to nature. The closer you can be to nature and really experience it, that is going to help you to get back in, because I think especially when we're talking about energy and we're talking about these experiences, a lot of times we can go to these experiences that are transcendent, right? Like,
Mm.
oh, like I'm gonna like get in my body so I can get out of my body, right?
Right.
And especially when you hear people talking about the chakras, and they'll talk a lot about these upper chakras, right? But we are human, right? We are here on this earth, and it is so important for us to feel connected and to be in our bodies
Ah.
and to feel grounded
Mm.
so we can experience these transcending experiences.
And I feel that sometimes, I know it's probably not as powerful as being outside and connected to the actual ground, but sometimes if I've had like a long day of clients, or if I've had a session that was just emotionally intense because it was a lot of trauma, I'll just lay on the floor. And
Yes,
I lay on the floor and I just feel like, whew, I just feel
yes,
more grounded, because it's
yes.
something about, like you said, being on that just really brings you back to the present and kind of helps you get back to your center. So I like that. And that's free. That's something you
Yes.
can do in your home, and you can do it outside, you can walk out. So I really like that idea of getting grounded as a sacred practice to restore intimacy.
And you're grounding your energy. You see, like you're grounding your energy. I love to do that, especially if I'm having high levels of anxiety, lying down even on your belly, right? And there's this physical connection that also that you'll feel throughout your body. It's almost of being held, right? And you're grounding your energy. So yes, slowing things down. I think that's the big thing, is slow down, focus on my breathing, get back in my body, where this is where I reside for now.
Right. This gives me different connection, and I'm not in multiple other places. I think that's good. Okay. So slowing down, grounding ourselves either with nature or lying on the floor, two solid ones. Any third one that you feel is sacred that people could appreciate?
We talk about sexuality and we talk about pleasure in that way, but I also think it's important for us to understand sensuality, right? So there are many ways to experience pleasure through all of our senses. And so when we start to ground ourselves, when we start to be more present and bringing the attention to all of our senses. So one thing about our people is that they have found joy, even in the most dire of circumstances.
Right.
And I think part of that too is part of why we suffer also being in a capitalist society, is that we have been also trained to believe that accumulating a lot of things and doing a lot of things and having a lot of stuff is what's going to bring us joy, is what's going to bring us. And that's not that it's not, right? It's not that toys are fun. I like toys.
Yeah.
But it's not what is required to experience joy. And I think part of why we can't always experience joy is because we are focused, again, it's linked to our bodies being production.
That's good.
I remember going to visit my grandmother in Mexico when I was a kid, and it's hot in Mexico.
It is hot. Listen, I went to Tulum and Cancun, and nobody prepared me for that heat, and I still have some of the scars. And I went and ate from that heat. It's hot in Mexico.
I grew up in Illinois, right? So we're growing up in Illinois. You're Americanized. You're coming to visit your family in Mexico.
Lord have mercy.
Right? And it's like, okay, there's no AC, and there wasn't cable, right? And so in spite of that, what the joy that you would see in the people, like the people outside, gathered outside, talking to one another, knowing the neighbors, waiting for the man who sells the paletas to go by, and you're going to be excited. So there was still like this freedom and this joy that came from being fully present, right? Like I knew that when I was going to go down there, I was going to run a lot around with my cousins. There was a certain, like, you give yourself permission. Also, like, I'm going to be sweaty and I'm going to be playing and I'm going to do these things that we wouldn't necessarily do back in Illinois. So I say all that to say is it's not always required that we have all of these big elaborate things. Bring it back to the senses. So what I remember about those times, I remember the smell of going to the corner shop and there being, all kinds of stuff there. I remember how the soda would taste in Mexico, because Coca-Cola from Mexico is much better and different than the one you get.
Yes. Okay. Noted. I'm gonna have to check that out.
I'm remembering like there being a mango tree in my grandmother's yard and eating the mangoes and then getting, all sticky from that. I'm remembering late nights and what it felt like to be out. So all of the senses can experience pleasure in different ways. So I think if you're going to have that liberation that you speak of, and if you're going to fully own your pleasure, we have to expand that to understand being sensual. Sensual and incorporating that sensuality. But again, just even the idea of like there was something sensual, not sexual, but sensual when we would eat those mangoes.
Right. It is an experience. It's something about it. And I think that goes back to divineness, right? I think about whatever you call it. I call it God. Some people call it higher being. Some people call it the universe. But when God gave us these senses to be able to see and experience and feel the world, it's something, as you were saying, that I was picturing it. Right. And I'm really big on visual and smell. So if I can see something gorgeous and something beautiful and smell it, then I'm good, and that is natural divine order. Like you don't have to pay for that. That's not something that is, you have to accumulate in terms of things in capitalism. And so I love that metaphor because it is something about going to different countries that I have found slows you down and reconnects you, because we do live in a capitalistic society, for better or for worse. It's pros and cons to this democracy and capitalism. But to get away from it and really connect with people and how they are very present, right? I would say with themselves, with their bodies, and with other people, that to me is always centering, right? So I don't even know if it's the place that I'm at or if it's the people in the place or both. But when it happens, it is a good way to reconnect me. And I always feel so centered when I come back, to the US. I always feel so centered, so grounded, and with a clearer vision about what I'm doing and why.
Well, and that is because our people know how to also savor life, right? So in spite of all of the challenges, like you think about how we find the joy in the senses. So that's another thing. When we go to Mexico, okay, well, you can't go to the store from like 12 to 2 because people are going to go home. They're going to take their siesta. They're going to take their break. Like, so that's slowing down, right? Like that. So, and the other thing I think about is the food, right? Oh, the food and how we enjoy food and how we connect with the food, and the food is delicious, right? Like, and the music, right?
Yes.
So the music, and we may not have a lot of money, but we're gonna be dancing, right? And you're gonna
be partying.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that is the thing that also is inherently part of us, is that we know how to still create and experience joy in spite of the oppression, in spite of living through these overwhelming experiences. So I think in particular, Black and Brown folk tapping back into that, and how we do that is by connecting more to our senses. And so even if it is a meal, how do I really experience the pleasure? You talk about mindfulness, experiencing the pleasure of this meal, and allowing myself to savor.
All right, y'all, that's a good place to pause. I hope that you have really gained some insight and knowledge from part 1 of this conversation about intimacy with our bodies. We're going to hop into part 2 next time. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and like this episode, subscribe to this channel, and share it with a friend, because we are all on a journey of becoming a higher version of ourselves, and we want to do that in community. So we'll see y'all next time.